the 45-day coaching program. First of all, thank you for being my student. So how do you learn, and why do some of us learn things more easy than others? This is the type of question that fascinates me. Brain research is one of the great frontiers in the understanding of human physiology and what makes us who we are. Now, it is an amazing time, and I would argue that my job is one of the most interesting ones in the world. What we know about the brain is changing at breathtaking pace, and most of what we thought we knew about the brain turns out not to be true, or should I say, incomplete. Some of the misconceptions are more obvious than others. For example, we used to think that after our childhood the brain didn't and couldn't change. It turns out that nothing could be farther from the truth. Another misconception about the brain is we only use parts of it at any given time and silent when you're not using it. This turns out to be untrue as well, for even when you're at rest and thinking of nothing, the brain is highly active. Advances in technology such as MRI have allowed us to make these and many other important discoveries. And perhaps the most interesting and exciting is that every time you learn a new skill, you actually change your brain. It's something we call neuroplasticity, and that's the flexible mind. Up to about 25 years ago, we thought that after puberty, the only change that takes place in the brain were negative. The brain cells are aging or the results of damage like a stroke. Then studies began to show remarkable amounts of reorganization in the adult brain. This same research has shown that all our behaviors change our brains, and that these changes are not limited by age, and that's good news, right? And that fact that this is taking place all the time. And very importantly, brain reorganization helps to support recovery after you damage the brain. The key to each of these changes is due to this neuroplasticity. So what does it look like? The brain can change in three very basic ways to support learning. The first is chemical, as the brain actually functions by transferring chemical signals between brain cells that are called neurons. Now, these trigger a series of actions and reactions. So, to support learning, your brain can increase the amount of the concentrations of these chemical signaling that take place between those neurons. Now, because these changes can happen very rapidly, this supports short-term memory or the short-term improvements in any motor skill. So the second way that the brain can change to support learning is by altering its structure. During learning, the brain can change the connections between your neurons. Now, here the physical structure of the brain is actually changing, so it takes a bit more time. These type of changes are related to long-term memory and long-term improvements in a motor skill. So let me give you an example of how these interact. We've all tried to learn a new skill, new motor skill, maybe playing the piano or maybe learning to juggle. You have the experience of getting better and better in a single session of practice and thinking, I've got it. And then you return the next day and all those improvements from the day before are lost. What happened? Well, in the short term, your brain was able to increase the chemical signaling between the neurons. That was while you were practicing. But for some reason, those changes did not induce the structural changes that are necessary to support the long-term memory. Remember that long-term memories take time, and what you see in a short term does not reflect learning. It's the physical changes that are now going to support long-term memory and chemical changes that support short-term memory. So structural changes also create integrated networks of brain reasoning that function together to support the learning. And it can also lead to certain brain changes that support very specific behaviors to change the structure of the brain. So here's some examples of that. People who read Braille have larger hand sensory areas in the brain than those of us who don't. Your dominant hand motor region, which is on the left side of the brain, if you're right-handed, is larger than the other side. And research shows that London taxicab drivers who actually have to memorize a map of London in order to get their taxicab license, They have larger brain regions devoted to the spatial for mapping memory. The last way that the brain can change to support learning is the alternates function. Now, as you use a brain region, it becomes more and more excitable and easy to use again. And as your brain has these areas that increase their excitability, the brain shifts how and when they're activated. With learning, we see the whole new networks of activity are shifting and changing. So neuroplasticity is supported by chemical, by structural, and by functional changes, and these happen across the whole brain. They work in isolation from one another, but most often they take place in concert. Together they support learning, are taking place all the time. So what I've just told you is how totally awesome neuroplastic your brain is. So why can't you learn anything you choose to learn? Why do our kids sometimes fail in school? Why is it with age we tend to forget things? And why don't people fully recover from brain damage? So what is it that limits the facilities and facilitates the neuroplasticity? This is what I study. I study what it is that makes things easier for people to learn, what I teach them, and my coaching lessons. One thing is absolutely clear. The best driver of neuroplastic change in your brain is your behavior. The problem is the dose of behavior. The dose of practice that's required to learn new and even old motor skills is very large. And how you can effectively deliver these large doses of practice is a very difficult problem. But not only is it difficult, it's an extensive problem. So how I have approached this was to develop therapies that prime or that prepare the brain to learn, and these include brain stimulation, exercises, and other secret methods to make you succeed. But during my research I realized that there are major limitations to the development, and that is the pattern of neuroplasticity are highly variable from person to person. Now, when I started researching this, the variability used to drive me crazy. It made it very difficult to use statistics to test my ideas and the data. So what I have come up with are specifically designed to minimize variability. With my ongoing research, it's becoming really clear that the most important, the most informative data that I collect is still showing variability. So the lessons I learned are very valuable in other areas. The first of which is the primary driver for change in a person's brain is their behavior. So sorry, but there's no neuroplasticity drug you can take. Nothing is more effective than practice at helping you learn, and the bottom line is you have to do the work. In fact, my research has shown increased difficulty, increased struggle, if you will, during your practice sessions actually leads to you learning more. And with that greater structural thing in your brain, which in turn helps you long-term memory, your brain is tremendously plastic and is not only changed both structurally and functionally with everything you do, but also by everything you don't do. One thing I found out is that with the brain there is no one-size-fits-all approach to learning, so there is no set recipe for learning. Consider this. It is a popular belief that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to learn and to master a new motor skill. I can assure you that it's not quite that simple. For some of us it will take a lot more practice and the others far less. So the shaping of our plastic brains is far too unique for there to be any single invention that's going to work for all of us in the same time frame. So this realization forced me to consider using personalized training. This means that each individual that takes my course has to use their own intervention and commitment. This is not surprising to me, as I realize just how complicated the human brain is. I also think of this in a much broader way, given the unique structure and function of each of our brains. What I have learned about the neuroplasticity applies to everyone. So the behaviors you employ in your everyday life is important. Each of them is changing your brain without you knowing it. So you have to master what you need to know in order for you to be successful and move on to building a solid business. So what we have to consider here is personalized learning, and that is what I have catered for in my coaching training course. The uniqueness of your brain will affect you both as a learner and also as a teacher when you have finished my course. Now, this idea will help you understand why some people can thrive on traditional educational training and others just don't. Like, for instance, some of us can learn languages easy and another person can excel at some sport. I can guarantee your brain is not the same now as it was when you started watching this video, and I think that's pretty amazing. Not only that, but each of your brains will have changed differently. Understanding these differences, these different patterns, this variability and change is going to change how we advance in neuroscience. It's going to allow us to develop new and more effective ways to teach and learn, and allow a greater match and respect between learners and teachers. This doesn't only apply to learning, it applies to each of us as a parent, as a teacher, as a manager, and also as a lifelong learner. Study what you want to learn. What will be best for you throughout your life? Practice the exercises that are healthy for your brain, exercise that will beneficial to you in life as well as in your business, and break those behaviors and habits that are not conducive to your well-being in the future. Practice, practice, practice. Learning is about doing the work that your brain requires. The best strategies will vary between individuals, you know that, and you will even vary between single individuals. Learning how to play music may be perfect for you, but how about you learning how to snowboard? That will be much harder. I hope before you leave this video you appreciate just how magnificent your brain really is. You and your plastic brain are constantly being shaped by the world around you. Understand that everything you do, everything you encounter, and everything you experience is changing your brain. Finally, what I want to say to you before signing off is when you finish watching this, go out and build the brain you want. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you've enjoyed learning about what your brain can really do.